This is the video review from the Korean line Miniforce. This figure is called Tyra Volt or Tyra Bolt. So this is the box. And first off, I really like the packaging. It really takes me back to when I was a young boy and seeing toys on the shelf. And then here's the back. It's basically just a figure that rides inside of a T-Rex, so it can become armor and it can also ride on top of the T-Rex. And here's Tyra Bolt with a couple of other Miniforce figures, and you can see they scale really well together. They're all about the same size. Well, actually, Tyra Bolt's about this big, so he's about 5.5, 6 inches compared to his big brothers. So let me just jump right into the big issue with this figure. This cost me about $60 after shipping. These figures were about $80 after shipping, maybe around $90 at most. So you can definitely see the difference. $60, $90, $80. And then let me bring in some other figures. And this is a few other figures that I paid $50 for or $60 after shipping. So these figures all cost the same amount. So Korean figures are really expensive. Another issue is the articulation is pretty limited. The shoulders don't move. You get a decent elbow bend, not 90 degrees though, bicep swivel, which is unusual in Korean figures. You get a bit of a forward kick, fair backwards kick, and then a little bit of a knee joint. And that's about it for this entire figure. And then the core figure has head articulation. So let me start, we'll take out the core figure, so you just lift up this back panel, and then he just comes right out. And then you have a core figure that has decent articulation as well. He's got elbow articulation, wrist swivel, swivel head, not ball joint, a ball joint, hip, pivoting knee, and then no ankle. So fairly basic articulation, and he measures about 3.5 inches. So he's actually smaller than a G.I. Joe, which is really unfortunate because that could have been a redeeming factor for this figure if G.I. Joes could actually fit on the inside. So unfortunately, it's a little too small for that. Transformation is really basic. You're just going to take out this weapon, which obviously becomes the tail, rotate up the handle. Then you're going to fold in these chest crests, and then butterfly the joints in. And then the back of the bicep, or the forearm, has these pins, which pin into the hips. Next, you're going to rotate up the head of the T-Rex and his little arms. And then you rotate the legs down on the regular knee joint, and then you can pivot these toes. I forgot to mention that piece of articulation. It doesn't really work for the robot mode because it pivots the wrong direction. That's mostly for transformation. And then you peg on the tail to the back. And now you have the rider T-Rex mode. So then you put the rider on the top. And then you're going to position the hands so they can hold these little steering wheel that was the chest crest. And that's what he looks like riding the T-Rex. Not too bad. Pretty fun, actually. So overall, I really like how this figure looks. The transformation is really simple, but it's fun, and I like the gimmick of the core figure riding inside the T-Rex as some powered up armor. I really don't understand the price point for this. It can't be that expensive in Korea. The value for this is really something like $20 at the most on a shelf. I'd be hard pressed to pay $30 for this, but I was curious. I didn't know how big they were. If they were as big as the normal Miniforce figures, it would be a real steal because it is really fun to play with. But you can see he's about Voyager size. So there you go, and this is about half the price, and I would say equally fun, if not more so. So the quality I think is still pretty good, maybe an 8 for quality. For the aesthetics of the robot mode, I really like the way this looks. I would say that is also an 8. And then for the vehicle mode, the aesthetic, maybe a 5. It's not a great looking T-Rex. And then for fun factor, maybe something like a 7. It's actually pretty fun, but the price really sours it for me. It's not worth it, and all the sellers seem to be selling it for the same price for some reason. And while we're here, let me just do a little bonus. So I added articulation to this figure. I gave him a wrist, so he doesn't have curling iron arms. And then I also gave him an elbow right here that can telescope in so he can still transform. So I did a little bit of modification and a ball joint neck, so his head's not sunk so far into his chest. And then if you watched my review for this guy, you know he had some big articulation issues. So I did cut off some of the shoulder pad so he can get his shoulder up a little bit further. And then you can tweak it so it's good, 90 degrees. And then I gave him ball joint wrists as well, so he doesn't have to have curling iron arms, and he can bend his elbow naturally now. And then I cut off all of this thigh section so he can kick forward this much, almost 90 degrees now. And then I also trimmed a little bit on his head so he can now turn his head fully. So just a little update there.